So kind of staying on the theme that Ken started us off with, it's a team effort, as you can see, for many different people at the club. So I'm going to invite up Elliot Dowling from the USGA and Bill Cygan from Silver Spring Club as a superintendent at Silver Spring. And he's kind of gone through some of these things at his club. And Elliot and Bill are going to do a walkthrough of the process from kind of A to Z, have a good conversation, and hopefully share some insight with you on how that process went. So please welcome Elliot Dowling from the USGA.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the last presentation was really a great lead-in to what we're going to talk about next. So I'm Elliot Dowling. I'm the regional director of the East Region. I live in Western Massachusetts and travel throughout New England, New York, some upstate New Jersey. But it's my 13th year, I suppose. So in my time with the USGA, whether it was in Mid-Atlantic or now Northeast, I've been a part of a lot of projects, and it seems like projects are coming up on most visits anymore, whether it's a large scale project like we're going to walk through, or something I'd say smaller, like maybe some new tees, some new bunkers, that sort of thing. But a lot of courses are interested in investing in their club now, in their course. Where it can get hung up at times is in that planning process, because you all know, I'm sure in this process, what starts as a couple tees, or we want to realign a fairway and add a bunker. Well, that starts to snowball, right? It's like painting your house or doing something. You look at one thing you want to fix, and then it makes sense to fix something else. So, do you have guardrails for that? What's the process for that? Who helps make those decisions? That's what we're going to talk about, and Bill is going through this, and I'll let Bill introduce himself here. But what I want to come out of this, hopefully, is this is a free-form conversation. We have just the one slide with our contact information. If you have any follow-up, reach out to either one of us after this. But this is an open conversation, not quite a fireside chat, but we'll call it a rainy day chat. So in that, if there are questions that come up, you can either hold them to the end or raise your hand if it makes sense and ask it at that moment. I don't want to miss. And I have some questions, pre-planned for this that I think would make sense for the room, but if there are things you want to talk about, want to hear more about, let's go in that direction. We do not have sort of a formal agenda for this. So with that, Bill, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. Thanks for everyone for having me. As was mentioned, I'm at Silver Spring right now in Ridgefield, Connecticut. I've been the golf course superintendent there for the past 8 years. Prior to that, I was at Wingfoot Golf Club, superintendent of the West Course. And I grew up in Western Mass at one of the lowest budget family public golf courses possible to get my start. And so it gave me a really broad perspective, kind of going from the bottom up to the top at a US Open site. So Silver Spring, I was looking for a new superintendent 8 years ago, and they recruited me from Wingfoot to bring some of the experience that I had there and help drive the club to bring their game up as well.
So now into that, Bill, what is the project you're doing? What is going on at the golf course?
So right now we are doing a full golf course rebuild, a renovation, not a restoration. We are doing all 18 holes, 9 holes at a time, rebuilding the greens, rebuilding the tees, rebuilding the bunkers, putting in a new irrigation system, regrassing the fairways, and we have some other projects going on around the clubhouse that are kind of tied into the golf.
So to get to all of that, to get where you are today, what was the problem the club was trying to solve for? Where did you start, and how did you know that you wanted to go down this path?
Great question. So we had a lot of aging infrastructure and a lot of deferred maintenance that we were dealing with. We actually used club benchmarking as well. And when it was all laid out, we realized if we did all this, it was going to take a lot of money, and the club was going to feel like they were under construction for 20 years. Having seen large-scale projects like this at Wingfoot, I realized kind of the interconnectedness of all of it. And so if we could group some of these things together, it would be less disturbance for the membership, potential savings, long term, and really just try to make a $10 million project feel like a $15 million project.
It's interesting, you guys have probably heard it at one point or another, but the number of times I go to a course and hear deferred maintenance, right? I mean, there's some really lean years in the golf industry, 08, 09, even a little bit prior. So you get this deferred maintenance, you get things that you wanted to attack at the time and couldn't. And I love the slide about the different buckets before, and some clubs, the green clubs, lean towards capital and spending, and the red clubs lean towards peeling back. And it seems like a lot of clubs, certainly at that time, were in that red bucket, or certainly are leaning in that direction of peeling back. So now we're in a position where golf is booming. And really that slide on the trajectory was interesting. I wouldn't have guessed 17, but certainly since the COVID boom, we're still in this COVID boom of golf. And so golf courses now are investing, reinvesting, it seems like. But the question, one of the things I want to draw out is where to start. Because if you look at your club, you probably have a lot of deferred maintenance. From what I see, it's probably poor bunkers, maybe some aging infrastructure. Irrigation is a big one. I would guess if I had to put my thumb on it, irrigation systems are one of the hardest things to get approved. They're a big price tag. They're not, years ago, actually some guys in this room I worked with when we were in college and just out of school. At that time, an irrigation system was, $1.5 million, you could get a really good system. I mean, now it seems like if it's not starting with a 4, probably a 6, it's not a good system. And the hard thing about that is it's completely underground. So now, as superintendents and myself, when I go to a golf course, we need to convey to golfers, members, owners, whoever we're talking to, that stakeholder, the importance of something that they will never feel, never touch, never play on, they'll never really experience other than the golf experience. And that's when trust comes in. You have to use your imagination. You have to trust us, and your superintendent that would say, if we can control water better, we will have a better golf course longer, right? If we don't have to overwater to get to areas, if we can pinpoint our water. So anyway, a little bit of a sidebar there, but irrigation systems coming up a lot or lately. Fortunately, several courses are now going through an irrigation install. Just know it's a big number. It's a really big number. And it's going to be something that's really difficult to accomplish because it's not new bunkers or new greens or new tees that are new and fancy and shiny and you can play on. You've got to use some imagination with irrigations and tough one. So how did you identify all of these problems? How did you know that you wanted to fix all of this on the golf course?
Well, as you mentioned, the irrigation system was the main driver. That was coming up on 25 years. The installation methods and materials that were done 25 years ago, even though it doesn't seem like that long ago, have really evolved. So you're not getting as much mileage out of the old systems. The new systems, you're going to be able to get more mileage out of them. And we actually had a case study right in front of us because we put our the previous system in 1999, and then in 2003, the club started master plan work. And they started master plan work doing a few holes at a time. And everywhere that they did the master plan work, they had to cut into this brand new system and rearrange the laterals and main lines to go around the new features that were being built. And when I got there in 2016 and going forward, everywhere we have a break is generally where we use the fitting to tie into the system. So what I said is we need to measure twice and cut once. With this coming up, let's look at all the needs of the golf course. The greens had no drainage in them. Every green in that area either has XGD or has been rebuilt in the last 15 years. So for us to provide the conditions to stay competitive in the market that we were in, we didn't have the infrastructure we needed to do it. I gave the example of, I've got a souped up Corolla and you're asking me to go out on a NASCAR track with the big boys. So let's get a NASCAR in here. And that's where we started looking at this infrastructure. And the involvement of an architect was huge in this process as well.
Was there a member survey taken on course conditioning and what they felt was most important, or some sort of ranking system?
Yeah, the club did a lot of surveys. We worked with club benchmarking, we did some internal surveys, and what the club found was that the golf course was the #1 asset that the members wanted to invest in, and they wanted to continue to keep it maintained in top shape and continue to evolve with conditions so that we could stay relevant, so we could continue to encourage the members. We're kind of on the northern end of Fairfield County, so people aren't exactly banging on our door to come in. We're a little bit further away from the metro lines and everywhere else. So having great conditions, having an architecturally interesting golf course is something that the club felt was going to help us to market ourselves going forward.
So as you evaluated your surveys and talked to members, and there's the grill room comment, I'm sure there was a lot of grill room conversation. How did you wade through the members who were really dead set against doing anything or this large a scale, and then sitting at the table next to them were the members who wanted to do all of it? How did you communicate with both groups to come together on some sort of agreement, or perhaps not, you just had enough votes to go through with it? But how did you work with both sides of that, of those parts?
So a lot of that fell on the general manager's shoulders. He's actually here today, Carl Beebe. He was very thorough and very patient in the process of having focus groups. So first he got the board aligned. We realized this is what is important to the members in the survey. The board is aligned. And now let's tackle these groups that have more questions and maybe don't understand it from the same perspective. Maybe they're thinking they're in a red bucket club, but the board wants to be in a green bucket club. And so in those focus groups, some people got out what they wanted, and they still think that to this day. And the people that just needed to see it a different way, started to hear the message and really understand the data behind it, and they started to come along.
Okay, so I guess one more on that is, did you start, how did you pitch this to your membership? Was it all or nothing, or this is what we need to do, all of this, or did you start small and inch your way up to where you are today?
We didn't start small in the sense that there was so much work that really had to be done on the interconnectedness of it and lining up all these contractors. One of the things that COVID created was a demand for projects, so it's a lot harder to get somebody in the door. So now you're looking at 3-4 years out of planning, where when I first got my start in Met at a private club in Greenwich, Connecticut, it was 2008, and you could basically call up a contractor and say, hey, in a couple of weeks we want to do a bunker project. They'd be excited to come do it. So with lining all that up and getting the contracts lined up, that's kind of what set everything in motion. As far as starting small, we did start with a tree removal process on the golf course. It had been really overgrown over the years. Playing corridors shrunk, fine turf shrunk, and we were really on the investigative stages of saying, is there something here architecturally significant? The club had a strange history. We didn't really have a famous architect to point to. There was some rumblings that Charles Banks may have been involved. And ultimately, we didn't want to try to pretend we were something that we weren't. We wanted to be the best version of ourselves. And so as we started peeling the layers back and looking at the property, we realized more that this was going to be a renovation and not a restoration. So that was probably the first small step that started us in that direction.
So it's interesting for anyone in the room thinking about this, and I should have asked, I will now, but who's looking at a project down the road, and what Bill said is right. If you think your club has aspirations of really any project at this point, and you think you want to do it soon, or you as the green chairman or president, whoever's in the room, are thinking, well, we're going to get this pushed through and get our bunkers fixed. You may be able to approve that, on paper, conceptually, club level. But contractors and architects are so backed up right now that whether you like it or not, this is probably several years down the road, unless you get lucky. I'll come across a course that their neighboring course is doing whatever project, and they just happen to be next door, they can fit you in. But if you're thinking that we want to get our bunkers done the next couple of years, you better get going really soon, because what are we at, 25 now? I know contractors and architects are looking 26, 28, 30. Long Meadow Country Club, where I live, if you're familiar with it, they wanted to do bunkers. They had someone lined up for 26. They drug their feet. Now they're like 29 or 30. They got moved all the way back. So just kind of a sidebar. And I'll tell you, it's interesting. I did a tree evaluation for your club, and you were like many I work with that through the years of just not only overplanting, but kind of careless planting trees where you didn't really think through what was going to happen long term. Some of these were really big trees. If you haven't been to the golf course, Silver Spring, it's a beautiful property with a lot of rolling elevation changes that have been hidden through the years, and with, I think, thoughtful tree removal, you've exposed a great property, a great golf course. But I know, again, probably a lot of you are in the same boat of, through the years of a few trees here or there. Oftentimes, a lot of it was for strategic purposes. I'm going to talk about some of this in my lightning round at the end, but trees to add difficulty. We've come back kind of full circle on that, fortunately. And I think it's something we probably always knew, but it was just a trend. But this, we're going to add trees for difficulty. It's not holding a lot of water. And for a lot of you with some really pretty old golf courses, you're hiding a great asset with just this overplanting. So I know that was a huge one to start with, because you had a lot to do. There were a lot of really big, what looked like nice trees, but they were just in a really bad location, and they were hiding other really nice trees. You certainly kept some great trees in the process. There are trees there, but got rid of a lot of ones that just didn't make sense. They didn't meet you.
Yeah, I mean, taking the trees out really brought the property from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, and it improved the playing conditions very quickly. If you're going to go into a big project like this and you don't have proper sunlight and air movement, the project's going to fail right after it gets finished, and then you're going to spend a lot of money and end up looking bad ultimately. So really having that good growing environment is the first step. Also, if you had asked me 8 years ago how important is drainage on this property, I would say it was a 7 out of 10 scale. And after getting a lot of the trees out, it tipped it down to maybe a 5 out of 10 scale. Drainage is always important. As Elliot had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, superintendents want to be able to control the water. You want to be able to add it when you need it. You want to be able to take it away when you need it. So having those systems in sync is what's going to help provide the conditions for the golfers.
All right, so a question I've got circled because I'm dying to ask it, because I know you've probably heard it, and I know superintendents in the room all over have heard this question. So you're now into it, project's going to happen, and even perhaps before that, but you're heading down this path. Was there ever a point where the club came to you and said, can you do this yourself, or how much of this can you do yourself? Can we do these projects in-house?
Yeah, that's a great question. The conversation started to evolve how we're gonna execute the process, and there's certainly a discussion. What can you bite off with your staff? What can you do in house? And the analogy that I use to the board to help explain it is, we're essentially the maintenance team. If you're thinking of this in the perspective of like an old farmhouse that you're renovating, we're the cleaning team. We're maintaining the house, we're maintaining the property. If a shingle blows off, we can put one back on. But in terms of putting a new roof in or repairing the foundation, that's left for the specific contractors themselves. And if we were to do the projects in-house, the actual maintenance on a daily basis would suffer. Then I had the question, well, if you're closing part of the course to do this project, don't you have less operational maintenance? And it really just gets reallocated. As you're building all these features, you have sod laying on a tarp for a week that you need to water 3 times a day. So now your water needs go up. When the green first goes back on, you need to intricately go through it and put top dressing sand in all the seams, and that takes a day to do an entire green. Then as the green starts growing in, you're mowing it with a specialty mower at a higher height of cut. And you have a fleet of mowers at various different heights, and you're mowing things at different stages. The irrigation system's offline in certain areas, so you're hooking up a couple hoses that are 100 feet long each, and you're standing out there just watering grass for 10 hours a day, and you have 10 people doing that. We had one of the driest falls that I've seen in a long time, and it was very beneficial to keep the project on track, but it also required an extra amount of water. We never got that Saturday night perfect rain where we didn't have to water sod the next day, so my staff was pretty much tied up with water the whole time.
So when I asked the question, I heard a few chuckles, which is what I expected. I hear this question all the time, and again, as the golfers in the room, it's an easy question to ask, and especially if you've toured, the maintenance facility. You've probably seen a big tractor and some sand storage or material storage, and it's an easy assumption to make. Well, you could do bunkers. We'll do a few a year. You can build these tees. We'll do a few a year. And while that may be true, what Bill said is one of the most important parts of what do you want to give up to do that. So if you have a staff of, call it 20, pick a number, to build those bunkers or tees, you're going to devote 3 minimally, probably like 5 if you want to get these done in some sort of time and fashion. So what are those 5 people not going to do? What are you willing to give up in that process? Is it break bunkers less often, mow rough less often, mow or grow greens less? Something has to give. You have those 20 employees for a reason. If you're going to take them and put them somewhere else, something has to give. So that's where I talk to when I go to a golf course is what do you want to do less of? And what's your tolerance for when things don't go right? So we had a really dry end of the year last year, late summer into fall. If you were in a project yourself, and now all of a sudden it's really dry, you're all hands on deck watering, forgetting sod you water, just watering greens and tees and fairways to keep them alive. It didn't rain for 9 or 10 weeks, it seemed like. Does that halt the project? Are you going to bring a supplemental crew in to keep your project going? You're always going to be sort of in flux with your in-house project. So if it's one tee, a bunker, a fairway, like there are things you can do in-house, I'd say in the fall, tie them up in the spring. I'm okay with that. I'm not saying you shouldn't do anything in-house. But I get this all the time. We need new bunkers. Let's do 3 holes a year, and we're going to save a bunch of money. You're always under construction. There's always equipment running around. And by the time you get through your course, you're coming back to those original three bunkers and starting the process again. You're just always in this cycle of, I hope we can do it. I hope the funds are there. It's, if you have the funds, you have the time, and you have the member buy-in, get it done. Get as much of it done as you can, which is my question to you is, are you doing all 18 in time or 9 and 9 in time? What are you doing with your project?
Yeah, so we have a pretty active membership. We do, post-COVID, we've been doing about 20,000 rounds a year on average. And the thought of being able to close down the golf course, while it was appealing to me, was not appealing to the membership. It's a family club. It's the first club for a lot of the members, and they really did not want to be in a period without golf. So what we decided to do is do 9 holes at a time, and the scope of the project, certainly helped tip the scales for that. So right after Labor Day, we closed. We did the back 9 first because it was adjacent to some tennis court work, pro shop, and parking lot work that we were also doing. And we just hit the ground running to build the greens as fast as we possibly could so that they had time to root and heal in. And then when winter came, we don't really know what winter is going to be, and we had the exact opposite of the fall we had, which was one of the coldest winters we've had in a long time. The ground froze nearly 1.5 feet deep, and for 2 months we couldn't do anything. And now we're getting back into it in the spring, and we have that buffer in the spring to finish up anything we didn't do in the late fall. And our goal is to open Memorial Day weekend. We'll then have 2 9s, a renovated 9 and an old 9 for this summer, which is the peak of our season, June, July, and August. And then after Club Championship on Labor Day weekend, we'll shut the front 9 down and we'll go through the cycle all over again. Throughout this time, having that 1 9 hole available in the shoulder seasons has been awesome. We were able to open the greens a week ago, which is pretty early for us up there in Ridgefield, and it keeps those people just hungry and itching to play golf, able to get out there. And one last note on that. We were expecting rounds to drop off last year with having 9 holes closed, and we actually still did just as many rounds last year as we did the previous year. It was a full 18.
So there's a lot of people probably heard different methods in bunker construction, different liners, honey green construction. Can you just tell everyone what you decided to go with, how your bunker, liner, sand, that sort of thing, so they can hear it?
So our golf course basically got redesigned, and the architect that we're working with, he's more of an in-the-field kind of guy. So we were doing our best to plan it out in concept. And one of the goals that we've said is we don't want to increase the amount of bunkers on the course because there's a big expense to bunkers from a building aspect and from a maintenance aspect. So we decided, even though the bunkers were generally old school, traditional flat bottom sand, we were still going to spend the money on the best liner technology. So we used one of the porous liner materials, capillary concrete, and we've been putting that in. And then bunker sand, the prices of bunker sand have gone completely through the roof in the last 3 years. And we had done a few bunkers prior to COVID with a certain type of sand that was relatively inexpensive, but there were some risks with having it available. So we found a yard nearby about a half an hour away where we were able to stockpile the sand that we needed for the project ahead of time, so we knew we were going to have it. And that allowed us to buy a slightly lower cost sand from what we would pay if we were bringing it in just as needed.
And you're rebuilding greens, correct?
Yep, rebuilding greens. Our original greens were native soil greens. They had 0 drainage in them. They performed pretty well for native soil without drainage, but over the years they had shrunk. There were, kind of a top dressing buildup around the edges that helped water from surface draining, which caused some winter injury problems where we had ice in the winter. And so when we were looking at it, in order to do the XGD, which is installing drainage into the original greens versus rebuilding, we did a thorough cost analysis and realized we pretty much had to strip the sod off the old greens, whether we were going to rebuild them or not. And that started to tip the price scale up closer to rebuilding altogether. And the benefits that I saw from rebuilding the greens at Wingfoot, it just made it worthwhile. So we ended up going with the rebuilt greens. Our architect was in favor of that because it allowed him to, as he said, add character to the greens. Our greens were pretty boring. They were flat. I think something had happened to them, early on in the course time. They didn't surface drain well, and so he's able to add some interest to the greens, which will be a benefit to the membership. So it's not just spending a bunch of money on infrastructure. They're actually going to be able to play something new and unique.
And an interesting conversation to have that I have with golf courses considering this, but what grass are you putting back on the greens?
So we are putting the original grass back on. It's a mixture of POA and bent grass. It's the grass that's been growing on that property for 100 years. Certainly courses are having success with switching to bent, and there was candidly, a concern with winter injury and POA. The bent grass is definitely, more tolerant to that. But at the end of the day, in order to really do the bent grass right, I feel strongly you need to seed the greens. And in order to do that, we would have had to close the entire course for a much longer period so that we could hit our seeding window in the summer. And that's what kind of tipped our scales just enough to reuse the grass that we had. So as of right now, we have the original grass currently on the best possible growing environment we can. So we're doing everything we can to control what we can control and what we can't control, which is what we all know, Mother Nature.
Okay, so I understand you guys did a lot of tree work. If you did decide to go bent grass, did you do enough tree work that it would be successful on all 18 holes if you had seeded the bent?
My assessment would be we're probably about 75% of the way there. And I think, sometimes you don't realize, 8 years goes by quick, and trees grow. And there were a lot of trees when I got there, so we're taking them down. We're trying to be conservative, not to shock members, but also doing the right thing at the right time while we're tearing apart. I think even just, as Elliot had mentioned, he came in for a tree survey. His predecessor had done one before in 2015, and so he was doing an updated version of that, and we still found plenty of trees to take down. So if we were going straight bent, there would be a little bit more work to do, but the heavy lifting was essentially done.
It's a difficult decision to make in this area in particular. Not only because you have the right climate to grow either bent grass or POA well, so I'm actually writing one of our future articles. My topic this year is on choosing which one of these grasses to go with, and I don't know how good this article is going to go, because I don't know that I have a conclusion. I don't know what you're going to get from it, but you're in a market where there are a lot of really good POA budding roots, and everyone talks about POA budding roots. We played U.S. Opens on POA budding roots. They played any number of major championships on POA and bentgrass. It's a difficult conversation. It's one that if you're going to redo greens, it's worth having, unless you're just dead set on keeping your grass. I'm assuming primarily a POA surface. That's okay. But it's worth having just because there are a lot of pros and cons to either. And I don't know that there is one great answer. If I felt confidently on that, I think I would have written it in my article. I don't have that. I don't want to tip this article to you, but you probably need to read it now because I'm telling you, I don't have a great answer. There isn't a great answer to this. There are pros and cons to both. One of them being, as Bill said, winter injury is always going to be the principal concern of POA. And if that's a real concern for your golf course, it's something to consider. It's always somewhat of a concern, but for whatever reason, you've got environments, you've got good surface drainage, things seem to go your way in the winter, then summer, I'd say, is less of a concern, because a lot of times you can control that. Even when it's really hot and dry, you can control moisture, you can control what you're doing in your greens. When we get a bad winter, there is just really nothing you can do. And I work with courses who remove snow and ice, who don't remove snow and ice, who cover, who don't cover, and it's like 50% of the time one of those courses did the right thing. And even in that can swap. You can do what you always do one year and be fine, do it the next year and have injury. And then the course down the road did the exact opposite and was fine or had injury, whatever the example may be. So this is such a complex problem that I talked to Dr. Huff, who's a professor at Penn State. He's in the breeding program. He actually bred the first seeded POA angler. You can purchase this now, seeded POA angler. Never had this before. And I asked him at the time, is this new genetically modified POA winter injury tolerant at least? And his response to me was, well, tell me what to tease out for this tolerance and I'll try to prevent that. The point being, there are so many factors that go into winter injury that correcting one thing, heat tolerance or drought tolerance or cold tolerance, isn't necessarily the one answer. So I ask it because I know what you're doing, but I ask it because I know a lot of courses wonder what's right for them. And I work with a few courses in Westchester, New York, where one course is seeding to bentgrass, and literally across the street, they're keeping POA. Who's right, who's wrong? Again, 50% of the time, someone's probably going to be right in that situation, someone's going to be wrong. It's tough, but it's a conversation that's worth having, even if you're rebuilding leagues. I'm trying to be conscious of time. We're down to, let's say, 5 minutes. Are there questions? Anybody have questions for Bill or I on the process?
Are you doing precision air or sub air?
We're doing precision air. So basically, we're just putting in the fittings because it's a small cost at this time while the green is torn up to put those fittings in and then be able to add it down the line. One of the things about precision air versus sub air is that they sell a portable unit that's basically just an engine-driven generator that goes on the back of the tractor. And so for small money in an emergency, if you really had to get the water off, you could, but we're not putting in a full system that's electronically controlled like a foot.
Did you decide to add tee boxes?
We did, yes. And strangely, that was one of the places that was neglected for many years. Some forward tees had been added previous to my time there, but never completed. And generally, the front nine had enough forward tees and the back nine didn't. And we were finding that the women's golf group hated playing the back nine, the 9-holers. They hated it because they were essentially playing, a senior plus course every day. And with reimagining all these greens, pretty much every green is in the same general location, but all the greens changed their shape and size and elevation. And it gave us an opportunity to just go through each hole thoroughly from tee to green and make sure it was set up for all levels of play. Our architect was, the main champion of this, basically saying, we want to make a golf course that's going to be harder for a good golfer, but easier for the higher handicap golfers. So widening out fairways, a lot less bunkers, a lot wider approaches, a lot more collection areas around the greens that I fall into the category of the higher handicap golfer. So I feel comfortable putting in those situations, and I think for a better golfer, they're maybe going to see a lie they don't normally see, and having to hit that short shot off of a lower height cut is probably going to be a little bit more of a challenge as well.
On the renovated renovated 9, how ready will that be come Memorial Day? On a scale 1 to 10, 10 being like the original 9, how ready and cured will those greens be?
It's a great question. As of right now, we're trending, to be up to 100% for Memorial Day. With that being said, this architect just designed an entirely new golf course. So we're going to have to learn how to maintain it again. We're going to have to make sure that the machines we have are the right mowers. And the next 1 to 3 years is really going to be that learning curve for us to get the property dialed in, so to speak, versus how we got the property dialed in over my first 4 years there.
So the course is right, you just have to get ready. But you think the members will receive it as a ready golf course experience, fairways, greens, bunkers?
Yep, absolutely. And the biggest thing when you're putting all this sod down, we're sodding the greens, we're using the grass. As thin as we cut it, you're still bringing a little bit of that material from the old green on. So the cultural practices are really important. That schedule will be a little bit different for a few years until we get that dialed in. It'll be details like that, but on a daily basis, it'll play just as good, potentially better, because we now have better infrastructure. When we did this at Wingfoot, I was there, we did the East Course front 10, then we did the East Course back 8, then we did the West Course front back 9 before I came to Silver Spring. That first 10 holes that we did, later that summer, it was the only renovated part of the golf course. We had one of our big 2-day member guests, and we got 3 inches of rain. The West Course was closed for an entire day. The entire staff was putting all the bunkers back together. The greens were soaked and soft. And the East Course, you could have played those front 10 holes as soon as the rain let up and the greens were rolling, 11 or 12 at that point. So certainly having all that stuff underground that nobody can see really gives you an edge.
I know I'm taking a lot of your time there. Just to follow up on that question, so what is Silver Spring doing this year? Are you limiting guest rounds and outings? Is there any of that that's being implemented as part of this?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit of an evolution. The biggest thing first that we tackled was limiting outings. We don't have a lot to begin with. A few charity outings, and occasionally we do an MGA or a CSGA event. So we tried to communicate that to those governing bodies as far ahead of time as we could. And then we did have to move a couple of our outings into later in August versus the spring outing. We didn't take any new ones on. In terms of guest play, we don't really have a plan for limiting it at this point. I think we're just going to have to kind of monitor it. The Pro has come up with a great term. We're going to have 3 seasons this year. Right? We have a 9-hole old course right now. Memorial Day to Labor Day, we're gonna have this taste of the new course, but we're not fully there. And then once we close in September, we're gonna have just the new nine open. So we're gonna kind of have to monitor it as we go as well.
It's just quickly on that, to your question on, how's it gonna be perceived as opening, and I know why you're asking that too, on Memorial Day is kind of the de facto opening date, but, I have entire meetings with clubs on the importance of sticking to Memorial Day until you can't. So the weather just didn't cooperate over winter or the spring, and if it's a really wet, cold, crappy spring, you do need to get grass growing, even if it's the grass that you took off and you're putting back. And it's important to at least monitor guest play. Outings, until the fall, I would say are like very minimal or none probably, but even guest traffic. Again, on new putting greens, that's always the sensitive one, even if you're putting your grass back. Just because you had it for 100 years, you did cut all but this much off. It needs to regrow, reestablish, and get back in. So that's often a conversation that's had easier for me, because it's easier for me to tell you than the superintendent, who's so excited to get this done and they want to get this pushed through and make this sound as happy as possible. Sometimes there's some gray cloud to this, and it may not go as swimmingly as you hoped. You got really lucky with a great fall to keep work going. Some people don't. Some people, it rains every day in the fall, and they can't work. Their schedule's behind, growing's behind. So there's a lot of luck involved, but this is a great conversation to have, because Memorial Day is the target. It may be early June, maybe late June, until you're fully ready and committed and the grass is ready. Car traffic is another one. I would be really hesitant to put car traffic on new fairways. I would keep them into the rough if you haven't done that, but monitoring traffic in general is really important for the full season, if not a little bit longer depending.
There's going to be a point, and we actually had a town hall meeting. That was another way that we generated some violence. We had about 180 people show up for a town hall meeting 3 years ago, where they got a chance to hear from the architect exactly what he was going to do with the golf course. I was up there, Green Chairman was here, Todd Payne, he was on the panel as well. We answered everybody's questions. And one of the things I warned the membership about is there's going to be a point in the spring where the back nine's going to look like it's ready to be played on from visual eye, but it's not ready to actually handle the foot traffic. But if you're doing 150 to 200 rounds a day on a golf course, you have immature grass. It's a recipe for failure if you don't give it the proper time to develop the roots down below. So communication to the membership is important. That's something that we can always do a better job of, and we're trying hard. I'm aligned with the Golf Pro. We send out a note every Tuesday at 8 p.m. like clockwork. We just send that out. This is what we did last week. This is what we're looking ahead this week. And we're actually going to continue it through the summer just so that we can communicate some of the conditions and how things are going and how we're going to tackle each.
All right, so we're out of time. I won't speak for Bill's schedule. I'm hanging around after lunch for a while if you want to ask other questions, but thank you for the time.